I invite you to open your hand for a moment and imagine someone dropping a marble into your palm. Now let's say this marble represents information. Notice its nature, the information swirling around. Now imagine someone handing you 1 marble per second. 1 1,000, 2 1,000, 3 1,000. Make that 10 marbles per second. Make it 100 marbles per second. Getting kind of hard to keep up? Now imagine someone handing you 11 million marbles per second. By now you're probably hearing the cacophony of marbles falling to the floor, crashing all around. But that's what's happening in your brain right now. 11 million bits of information coming at you into your nervous system through your 5 senses. But yet your brain can only handle 134 bits of that information per second. So what determines what marbles remain in the hand versus which fall to the floor? Now, as a physician and a trainer of neurolinguistic programming, I study how the brain processes information and how that processing influences what we think, say, and do. Over the past decade, what I've come to understand is that if we want to expand our consciousness and evolve beyond the current state of suffering, we must put our perceptions and automatic ways of thinking under the microscope. When we begin to reevaluate our responses and reactions to one another and the world, it gives us opportunities for a brand new perspective. And it brings pathways for a more fulfilling life and a more sustainable future. Now let's first talk about how the brain processes information and how it chooses what to keep. As I said earlier, the brain is trying to deal with, make sense of 11 million bits of information per second. And to do that, it has to filter it down into manageable chunks. And to do that, it creates something called cognitive shortcuts, a scientific way for saying the brain is inherently lazy. It'll always take the path of least resistance. Now, these cognitive shortcuts, they're like little information filters that generalize, distort, and even delete information based on our upbringing, our memories and past experiences, our beliefs and attitudes and values, and our environment, to name a few. So the marbles that remain in your hand are the filtered bits of information based on these cognitive shortcuts. And that is what you're responding and reacting to every day. Now, as brilliant and intricate as this sounds, it comes with some major limitation. Because let's face it, most of us have a clue that we're walking around operating on filtered bits of information. So we tend to take what we see, hear, and feel as the absolute truth. And as you know, when we take something as the absolute truth, we cut off all other possibilities. We can't see people beyond the labels we put on them. We're blocked from creating new, innovative ideas to old problems. We're stopped from being bold and courageous, creating connections and building bridges from one to another. And it leaves us unable to make meaningful change in our lives, with our families, with our communities, in our society, and in the world. You see, because these little information filters, they create our perceptions. They set up our expectations, and they drive our behavior. Now, a good example of this is a study done in 1964 by researcher Robert Rosenthal. In this study, he took a normal IQ test and he dressed it up with a fancy name, the Harvard Test of Inflected Acquisition, which was to be given school-wide. He told 8 teachers that 20% of their students were expected to bloom academically and intellectually throughout the school year. Then he took 18 students, chose them at random, and labeled them the bloomers. What they found was that the teacher's perceptions and expectations influenced how they spoke to and responded to those 18 children. And they did indeed perform at a higher level. But what they also saw was that the teacher's expectations and perceptions of the non-bloomers were more negative, and it also influenced their interactions with those children. And those children performed at a lower level as expected. You see, the brain is designed to seek things in the outer world that match our inner perceptions. If you are convinced that something is impossible, all you'll see are the obstacles and limitations. But when you focus your mind on the results, on the vision, on what's possible, your brain will allow you to see and even create the pathways to get there. When we begin to re-examine the filters that drive our perceptions, we often end up with unexpected and unimaginable results. Now, one of the gifts of working with clients is that I get to help people redefine old models of the world by helping them break down old filters that create faulty beliefs and perceptions. When I first started working with Marcus, he was dead set that he and his ex-wife Amaya would never get along. And as having held on to that belief for so long, one of the major impacts is he didn't get to interact with his children the way he wanted to. And on the occasion when he did see his children, rapid conflict would arise between he and Amaya, ending in this emotional explosion. One day in one of our sessions, I took Marcus through an exercise that would allow him to literally step into another's perspective. First, I had him get in his own body to see, hear, and feel what he might be feeling. Then I had him step into Amaya's view to see, hear, and feel what she might be feeling. Finally, I had him take an observer perspective, like a fly on the wall, so that he could see the bigger picture. From here, he not only saw Amaya for the first time, he saw the entire dynamic. What he saw was that his perceptions of his ex-wife had created a self-fulfilling prophecy that reinforced alienation rather than connection. And with these old perceptions out of the way, he saw what he had been missing all along: Amaya's fear and her pain. With this new perspective, the healing began. Amaya and Marcus rebuilt their friendship and a supportive co-parenting relationship. Marcus fully reunited with his children, and when Amaya was diagnosed with cancer a few years later, he was able to be there with her and the children every step of the way, and by her side with love when she unfortunately passed a few months later. What if you walked in the world aware of your filters? What might you see that you've been missing all along? What new opportunities might you glean? Who might you become? Now, you might be saying by now, well, how do I dismantle these filters? Well, in order to change a filter, you must first see the filter. So I'd like to do a quick exercise that will allow you to see and change a filter right now. I invite you to get comfortable where you are, and if you'd like to, close your eyes. Recall a past experience with a person with whom you recently felt challenged. And you can start with something simple. As you recall this past experience, go ahead and get into your body so that you can see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, and feel the feelings you were feeling at that time. Now, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to step into position number 2, looking through the eyes of the other person. So step out of position number 1 and into position number 2, looking through the eyes of the person with whom you're engaging. It's as if you're in their body looking back at you. See what they're seeing, hear what they're hearing, and feel what they might be feeling. The next position is position number 3, the observer perspective. So step out of position number 2, and now I'd like you to allow yourself to float high above position number 1, as if you're going to plant yourself as a fly on the wall. As you're looking down from this position, see what you're seeing, hear what you're hearing, and observe the entire dynamic, the bigger picture. Good. Now you're going to float right back down into your body, looking through your own eyes again. What's different? What did this new perspective make available? Were there any stories that you had that you see may not be true? Any judgments that you can now let go? This perceptual positions process can be used in a multitude of ways to help you to gain a brand new perspective. I myself use it often with my family, with my friends, with colleagues, and even people I'm not so fond of. And I use this with groups and facilitated leader teams. In fact, I frequently incorporate this process in the emotional and communication intelligence work that I do with organizations. I do this work with leaders creating diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies to give them the perspective they may be missing, to help them see assumptions they may be making that might be sabotaging their efforts, and to even highlight ways where they may be part of the problem. But how will you use this process? Now, I know for some of you, this might have been a little bit challenging and even overwhelming, because it requires that we be honest with ourselves, that we take responsibility for where our perceptions may not be that accurate. But what new life could be made possible if being willing to re-examine those lost marbles of information, we see something that allows us to create or mend a relationship that may never have happened? And who could you impact that you might otherwise never have? Your neighbor, your doctor, your boss or colleagues, your parents or children. Could you become a catalyst for others to begin picking up those lost marbles of information, creating new conversations between unlikely communities, and healing divisions between old divided ones? I want to leave you with an invitation. Next time you encounter someone unlike you, someone seemingly different, I invite you to check your filters. What am I already thinking about this person? What have I already decided? And what would I normally say? Ask yourself, what marbles of information might I be missing? And if I were to change a filter right now, what new future could I create? I want to leave you with a quote, one of my favorites from Lao Tzu. Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Watch your words, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, for they become your habits. Watch your habits, for they become your character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Thank you.